Oh, wow. Look at that.
Big a picture as I can get. It's not going to have any of the
Transitions.
don't have any animation on it, but that's all right.
Yeah.
All right, so we started out in San Juan, Puerto Rico, and as you know, it's a U.S. territory, an old city, a walled city at one time with two big forts on it. And we, a friend and I took a cruise trip that left out of there. We started out a day early, so we'd be sure to be there before, to be sure that we'd be there when the ship left. So that's always a good thing. So it's an unincorporated territory, as you know, and they'd like to become a state. 3.5 million or 3.2 million originally settled in 1508, way ahead of the mainland. You may recognize the name Juan Ponce de Leon. He tried finding the, what was it, the City of Youth or something like that.
Fountain.
So you remember that story?
The Fountain of Youth.
So it's that guy. But the Spanish founded the Ciudad de Puerto Rico de San Juan Bautista, a long, long name, the rich port city of St. John the Baptist, otherwise known as San Juan. 80% of Puerto Ricans live in the city, though of course we have the rest of it. So we did visit the El Morro Fortress. We had a day to visit a few things in the city. As you see, it's mildewed, which is that nice Caribbean climate. And the fort itself is well stocked with cannons, as you see around it, and facing inland in case they were bombarded from inland. But they had these cannons at different levels, so they could attack any ships that were coming both broadside or hit their sails or whatever, depending on their height. So it was all nicely planned to protect the city, which it did pretty well. But we're going to see on every island forts, because the French, the Dutch, the English, Spanish were all there and all fighting each other for a couple hundred years. So they're just forts on every place that we went. My picture of the Capitol building and the internet's picture, what it actually looks like from the front, a little bit better picture. And also the statue of Christopher Columbus, who was, of course, a prominent figure, who's one of the first Western European to come to the Caribbean. Of course, there were native people living here already. And the Plaza de Armas, which is typical of the Spanish cities, the place where people would gather up their arms to fight. So you have a Plaza de Armas in almost every Spanish city. This was a former convent, this particular hotel, and just some of the city streets, what you would expect to see in a Caribbean type city. And there is our ship. We're ready to board. And if you've been on ships, you know what they're like. This was a Royal Caribbean Empress of the Seas, and it was their last ship, their last trip before they got refurbed. So it was not the greatest ship to be on, because, you know, it was a little musty, a little out of dated, you know, the carpet was fraying and things like that. So I am sure that it looks just fine now, because they do fix those ships up. But that particular trip out was probably not at its best. But other than that, the cruise itself was very nice, and we enjoyed it. So just a couple of pictures from cruise ships. You know what they're like. They have all the amenities and the shows and all. And of course, the beautiful sunset every night, and your ubiquitous folded towel on your pillow every night, whoever he may be. This is where we're going, and they should have showed you one by one that we started from Puerto Rico right here to St. Kitts, to St. Martin's, to Antigua, to St. Lucia, to Barbados, to Isla Margarita, right off the coast, and Aruba, which is not far off Venezuela, and ending up in Curacao. So you don't have the nice animation for that. So our first stop, St. Kitts, and there is moi. And as you saw from the first slide, this was from 2007. I was a little bit younger then, and over Thanksgiving weekend or week. So in St. Kitts, like all the islands, we come into the main port, which is Basse-Terre, and pick some tours to take. And of course, you can't see all of it in any day trip. Notice that Nevis is just off the coast, about 2 miles And that was the home of Alexander Hamilton, if you've forgotten your musical history. And we saw these 2 points of interest in the island, not all of it. And if you've been there, you may have seen other parts of it. It is now independent from England, and with that French name, it's a little put you off. It's a Basse-Terre, which of course, that's due to the fact that they were fighting the French off and on. And we visited that nice fort that they have kept up for us. Not a large country, 101 square miles. When you think about it, it's like 10 by 10 square miles. It's not very big. And I'm also put some of them, the population and the population that is African-American descent, because of course they did import slaves to all these islands. And I'm not saying what is the other 8%, because typically there'll be 1 or 2% white and about 4 or 5% mixed, and the rest from all over the world. So like many of these islands, Columbus was here first and named it after his patron saint, Saint Christopher. And Christopher, you might wonder, where does Kitts come from? Kitts is the nickname for Christopher, which I didn't know. So here we are arriving in Basse-Terre and finding our little trip out to Brimstone Hill, the fortress that is so nicely restored and is now a UNESCO World Heritage, because it is the best preserved. And it had a number of battles with French. I won't go back and forth and tell you what they all were. We'll be here all day just with this one. But it is nicely restored, and we were able to go in and kind of see how soldiers lived in those times and how they maintained a presence both in with the French fighting them and protecting their island. So meeting the native tribes, of course, we know that when foreigners came, they brought smallpox with them, and most of the native people who lived here, the Arawaks and Caribs mostly, were caught smallpox and were killed off, unfortunately. So they brought in slave labor. So this fort is interesting in that they have these kinds of rooms set up to kind of give you an idea of what it would be like to be a soldier stationed there. And they're even furnished. Also on that trip, we visited Ramsey Manor, which was a plantation house. And you might see that the first owner was Sam Jefferson. That should ring a bell. An ancestor, I should say, of Thomas Jefferson. There were only 5 owners over these 5 centuries. Ramsey Manor was from the Earl of Romney. He was a sugarcane grower who did free his slaves before England freed the slaves in 1836. The Winfields also had it for a couple hundred years. It now houses the Carabel Batik factory, homemade kinds of things, and the Romney Gardens, which started way back when Romney had it. So you wouldn't think of Ramsey Manor being a Caribbean looking house. You think maybe English manor, but no, this was a Caribbean type style manor house. And I had several pictures of it, but you get the idea. It's the wicker and shade and no air conditioning. And the gardens themselves, of course, very tropical, lush. You'll see mangoes, coconuts, all that kind of stuff, banana trees growing, dating way back, and they're still there. Oops, I think I'm going the wrong direction. Let's go this way. One of the people working there, and this huge tree that's been there over 400 years, it covers about a half an acre. And this is the Carabel Batiks. I actually bought some bracelets that they made with at this shop. But batiks are made on fabric with wax and different colors, colored paint. And I had some lovely things to buy there. And we didn't visit the St. Kitts beaches, but they do have beautiful beaches there in case anyone's interested. So going on to our next island would be St. Martin's, and that is the only one of the 2 that is divided into both Dutch and French. So here we are docked, and the capitals are Philipsburg, where we came in, and the Dutch part of it, which is this bottom half. Notice it's a poorly drawn map. It doesn't show you where the rest of the border is. And the French side, which is Marigot, and also the typing is awful on this particular map. So it's a better map. Also named for Christopher Columbus's patron saint, who was St. Martin of Tours. So the French section is this, about 40 square miles, and this is where we took our tour to Marigot in the in Saint Martin or San Martin. And Phillipsburg is where we came in with our ship. There's lots of hills in this area. So we did have a nice little ride and views of the ocean as we went across. So as we came into the port, we saw that there are lots of trips and tours we could take. Here's the hat that I bought there. I had it on, but I opted to take it off. So we had island tours, and in the square in Phillipsburg is St. Martin of Tours, who St. Martin was named after. You see, he's a peg leg. I think he'd been off doing something too, something dangerous. Here's the little shops where I bought my white hat. So over in Marigot, we had, since it was hilly, we got some nice views of the bay, and very pretty, very lush, whereas you would expect a Caribbean island, these cutting papaya in the market. This is the Paradise Peak, which is Peak Paradise Hotel below it. The Peak Paradis, I suppose. And St. Martin's Fortress, we have another fortress on the hill. So down below along the shore is the market. And again, you see that kind of wicker type architecture, which is very typical, particularly of St. Martin's. And it's a little street art. I wish I could tell you what was going on in this picture, but I'm not. Things for sale in this area. These little pavilions is where the vendors would set up their wares. And this little cafe, I just expected Ernest Hemingway to pop out any minute. It looks like it. He would right belong in a place like this, don't you think? So here are some of these little stalls that are set up with the produce. This statue was added afterward, and I liked it so much I added it even though we didn't see it. It was added later. Our next time.
Mary, before you go to Antigua, on your slide when it was talking about the different governments of the island, you had something about the Netherlands in 2010.
That would be independence, I believe. Let's see.
What she was talking about, I don't know if you're aware, the island is two different countries.
Yes, this was owned. It was a possession of the Netherlands. This was a possession of France.
Still to this day. So if you're
Okay.
French, it's still a French possession, but St. Martin, but the Dutch part of it is now like an independent country, the way England has independent countries that are part of their Commonwealth.
Okay.
A constituent, they're an independent country, but affiliated with the Netherlands.
However, they're totally separate. So if you're trying to make a phone call when you're on the French side, and you want to call the other side, it's a long distance phone call all the way back to France.
Even
and back.
though it may be just across the street,
Yes,
which is what happened to us.
I'm going to see if I can skip down here. Yeah, and see if I can move us along a little quicker than going through all of them. Let's see.
Well, thank you.
Okay, yeah, that's just the term they use. It's a constituent country. It's independent.
Okay.
So Antigua is our next one. They pronounce it Antigua. This is the same kind of thing. They were an English colony, but they became independent, but they're still part of the Commonwealth in 1981. The capital is St. John's. And what you want to notice on this map is all these little bays. Now, this is the one that sailors like because there's a big sailing population that likes to bring their boats, sailing boats here, and they have sailing races and things like that. What I've circled down here is where we went on our little day trip from the ship. So again, Christopher was there. The Spanish brought their smallpox with them. And then the English came. Now notice there's a long distance, a lot of time here between the time that the Spanish came. They didn't claim it apparently, or if they did, nobody paid attention to it. And the English came back and they did claim it for England. But they did bring the African Americans to work as slaves to grow tobacco and then sugarcane. We're going to see more about the sugar industry a little bit later. And of course, that Black population greatly outnumbered the Europeans even today. So St. John's has a lovely harbor, and the ships come in early in the morning and makes for some nice photographs. We did get our day trip settled and went out to Nelson's Dockyard. This is the Lord Nelson who's on in Trafalgar Square. He was at that battle as well, but he did sail the Caribbean. And the Nelson's Dockyard is where ships would come in, English ships would come in to be repaired. Remember, all these battles are going on. Some of them were damaging the ships. We had pirates as well. So they would come in and have repairs made to hulls, to masts, to sails, whatever. So it was a yard where they could come in, and these buildings are still there. This was the remains of a boathouse where they could bring ships in for repairs. And a little bit about, and then I did have a zoom on this that would let you see this in a little more detail, but you see the sailor sewing up some of the sails. Nelson did live in this house when he was there. And cannons, of course, you got to have your cannons. Another place from a hill, a nice view of Falmouth Bay, and notice all the sailboats. As we said, all these little bays were just perfect harbor for these sailboats. Shirley Heights was a guardhouse to overlook the bay and protect it, of course, with its cannons. And of course, always every night you would have a beautiful sunset before moving on to the next island where you would wake up somewhere else. So our next stop was in St. Lucia, which again was an English island, though it sounds like it's Spanish. It was an English island and is now part of the Commonwealth. And its capital is Castries. And the Europeans first, the French were first, as you see some of these French names and Spanish names. And it was an English colony, and again raised sugarcane, but it became independent in 1979. Again, very small. And I put a blue circle around these. We did not visit the two peaks that are famous on St. Lucia, but I did want you to see a picture of them after we look at our little trip that we took. And this northern part of the island is just very rural. There's nothing exciting to see there, but it was very rural. And you see it's very hilly, and every yard had fruit trees, bananas and mangoes and papayas. You could pretty much live off what you grew in your yard. Very lush. So this is just along the harbor, lots of little shops and things, lots of funky little town, and things in the market to buy, of course. One of the stops we made on this little bus tour was at a doctor's house. I guess he rents out to the cruise ships to give people a view, just a nice outside view. We have little tea, but just a view of his house. So a government building that was on our way. Some views of the harbor as we were near Castries and their community college. And again, there are lots of fruit trees and cannons. Don't forget the cannons. I'm not sure what tree this is. It looks like that African tulip tree that grows in Hawaii, but I wouldn't swear to that because it's not close enough for me to tell. Saw lots of goats, lots of bougainvillea, very rural. So these are the two mountains that I was talking about, that the Grand Piton and the Petit Piton, which are the two mountains at the south end of the island that are particularly pretty to see. And this I grabbed off the internet. So our next island was Barbados. You can see Feliz Independencia, happy independence for Barbados, again written in Spanish, but Barbados was English. So the capital of Barbados is Bridgetown, and it's an interesting island too. The area that we visited is over here in this area, St. Philip's, so I didn't know that till I started looking around. Really, when you start driving, you have no idea where you're going sometimes. A beautiful sunrise. And this port had 3 big cruise ships when we were there, plus this gorgeous sailboat. So the first inhabitants, like these other islands, Arawaks and Caribs, claimed by Spain and Portugal, but they didn't stay. Captain Paul came and claimed it for England, and England stuck. So it was named Barbados because the island itself looked like little ficus tree roots, like little beards. It gained independence in 1966. Again, not a large island, 21 by 14 miles. It's not very big. It does have mahogany trees on it. We visited a mahogany factory where this gentleman was making things out of mahogany and had some beautiful things to show us. And of course, that is some of these craft items are things that they do in the islands now, since they don't do the sugar cane so much anymore. And this little guy was having lunch over the grass is greener on the other side of the fence. We did visit the rum factory. It is still made there. The Tommy Bahama, if you've ever had rum named Tommy Bahama, that's where it's made. It's called the Four Square Factory. It was a working sugar factory and later a rum refinery. And it have thousands, hundreds of thousands of African slaves here that worked on these plantations. And of course, that was a deadly journey for most of them, because when they came over, they didn't make any try to keep them alive, so to speak. They were really just stacked like cordwood. You may remember some of those pictures from Cape Town, the same kind of thing. But some of these buildings that are still there, but the sugar became very profitable in those couple of hundred years. So making rum was their big industry from the sugarcane factories. The factory now has a tour of a lot of the history of the sugar industry and the rum production. Here he is showing us around, and this is a little pamphlet. I know it's a bad way to read it, but I wanted to go to this one to show you. They called it the triangle of trade with England, West Africa, and the Caribbean, where England ships brought African slaves over, not really paying a lot of attention to whether they lived or died on the way. They were set to work in the sugarcane fields, which is a terrible job, very hot, cuts your fingers and hands, terrible conditions, raising sugarcane. And then that rum that was made from the sugarcane was sent back to England. So you had kind of a triangular economy. And of course, you have to have a sample when you go to a rum factory. The other thing to see in that area is the Sunbury Plantation House. It's one of two plantation houses that's still maintained and open to the public. This one was really pretty one, open over 300 years. And you notice it's this plantation style, lots of shutters, wickers, porches, no air conditioning. And they have a lot of things that you can see from the 16, 17, 1800s that are really a look back in history that's very interesting. So this would have been your English family who comes over here and has imported things from England, and all your furniture and nice things, your silverware and dining things would be imported, and you would have plenty of slave labor. So it's interesting to see what the upper class looked like and how they lived at that time. And this porch, look at the wicker furniture and the shutters on the window, so you get some breeze through the house. And our Barbados sunset. Our next stop was Isla Margarita. And this is a favorite place for those in Venezuela who have the bucks to come and have a resort experience, because it is Venezuelan. And guess what? Columbus was here too. There are two islands of Isla Margarita. This first part is like the islands we've been seeing, very lush, and the western part more dry peninsula. And we're going to see that in Curacao and Aruba as well. And this island was called the Pearl of the Caribbean because they did have a big pearl industry here. The largest city is Puerto Mar, which is over here, and the capital's inland a little bit, La Asuncion. So we visited those two. Going off, we see that the seaside has some places to dine and look at the ships going by. So the capital of Asuncion was founded in 1562, again, way before there was towns here. And that is the capital of the state of Nueva Esparta, Venezuela. Simon Bolivar is the fellow in this, the statue in the center of town, because he is the big hero of South America. And he was confirmed as the commander-in-chief of the Venezuelan Republic. So he was involved in this fight for independence in the South American countries during this time. Every town square has his statue in it in those countries. So this is the town square, not very auspicious for being a capital city. This is the cathedral of Our Lady of the Assumption, excuse me. Not in good shape, as you see that mildew from the dampness of the Caribbean. But it is the second oldest church in South America, built in 1570. Asuncion also has a fort to protect it up on a hill, and that you can still go visit. And of course, it has its cannons and a good view of the city down below. Another place we visited was the town of El Valle de Espiritu Santo, which is the Holy Spirit. And this church is the Church of the Virgin of the Valley of Margarita. And it is a shrine. So we have pilgrims coming to this shrine. It's the shrine for fishermen. And this little part back here is over here. This is this big arch. Look at the beautiful woodwork in the arches here. And since it's a shrine, of course, you have to have a virgin in the shrine. It's kind of like a big doll that's dressed up in all these pretty clothes. So these are the two of the windows. You see the pilgrims coming to the church and the Virgin, who is the reason people are going. This is the town of Puerto Mar. It used to be the Port de la Mar, a little bit shorter, just shortened to Puerto Mar. It's the largest city on the island. And this, I wish I could tell you more about. We visited this house, and it was a government official of some kind. And I looked on the internet to see what house, who owned this house, but I was not able to find that information. So if anybody knows, I'd love to know. It looked like a lovely dwelling, indoor courtyard with lush plants and lots of artwork. A very pretty house on a Spanish artifacts. But I don't know who lived here, I'm sorry to say. We went to the market as well, where there were some resident parrots entertaining people and various other birds flying around. And of course, like most markets, it has things for the tourists that they hope you will buy. Some lady's trying one out before she buys, I guess. And in the market, you'll see native crafts as well as some of the pearls. Not a good photo, I'm sorry to say, from the pearl industry there. Also some beautiful beaches around Puerto Mar. You see the main city over here, but there are some lovely beaches around Puerto Mar. And we just stopped off for a little drink and had a little break to see that. So we're leaving Isla Margarita to go to Aruba, which is the farthest west that we went. Again, lots of sailing, and it's a lot of people's favorites. In fact, I would say Aruba and Curacao were my favorites as well. So we're way over here. There is also Bonaire in there, which I did not go to. We did not stop at, but it's part of these three Dutch islands, Aruba, Bonaire, and Curacao. So the capital that we came into, the cruise ship comes into Oranjestad. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, not knowing Dutch. But these two islands are very different than the ones we've been seeing. As I said, the others have this lush, tropical look to them, and this is much more dry. You see cactus blooming along here, or beach houses are really pretty. Beaches are pretty. But this area is very interesting, I thought, and looks entirely different than any of these islands. So this island too is not very big. It's a part of the ABC Dutch Islands, they call them. It became independent in 1986. And it has this very dry, arid climate, but it's sunny and it's out of that hurricane zone. So a lot of people like to go. They're not going to get hit by hurricanes normally. So it's known for its good beaches and good weather. And of course, you will see Dutch buildings all through it, Dutch looking buildings. This is the one on your invitation, of course. But hotels are right up against the beach, and you'll see them with lovely yards and places to hang out, and little snack bars and boats to rent and all that good stuff. Beautiful clear water, beautiful white sand, very, very, very nice beaches. So there's a good diving, good tropical fish and little submarine tours that you can take, which we did a little bit later. I'll show you that. Parasailing, all kinds of like pirate ships that you can take rides on. So there are all kinds of things, the flora and the fauna. And this is the area I'm talking about called the Caribbean region. It looks like some alien has dumped these enormous rocks, some with big holes in them, in this landscape that's just full of cactus, and it's just very strange. And it has all these walking paths through it. Some you can go to the top and they make it easy for you with steps, and some you really have to work at it to get up there. So when you do though, if you go up on top of one, even if it's climbing around to get to the top, you're going to get a great view. And look at these, it just looks like these boulders are just strewn around by some giant. I have no idea where they came from or why they're like that. But you also see that Aruba is got all these modest little homes just strewn everywhere. The whole island is just covered with them. And of course, if you happen to be along the beach, you might have something really very nice. But they're all just right among all these rocks.
So Mary, Stan asked, what was it about Aruba that made it your favorite?
I think because it was just so different. The Dutch influence, the beautiful beaches, all this cactus kind of stuff. I thought this was just very different from all the other islands. I thought it was interesting. So as we come along then to the beaches, at the shore, we see these succulents growing in the black rock. It looks volcanic. And this is one of these natural bridges. You have to look a minute to see that this is the ocean beneath it. And a little sign telling you, don't walk on the bridge because look what happened to this one. They had a couple of them that broke off. And so they're warning you not to walk on that bridge. But it's the coastline here is not like these beautiful beaches. It's very rocky, very rough. But there is a lighthouse down at the end of it, and these lovely houses, big houses along there. And if you're looking for a house there, be prepared to pay some big bucks, particularly if something right on the ocean. There's a lighthouse called the California Lighthouse, which was named for the steamship California, which had been wrecked there. So the lighthouse was restored, and it coincided with their 100th anniversary of the completion of the lighthouse. It's on the northwest tip of Aruba. I think you can go up in it, but you know me, I don't go up. So the town Oberonjestad is an interesting little town too, very funky. If you're along the seashore, you'll see all these big yachts, and this guy's cutting open a fish he just caught that you can buy. So it's yacht haven. And if you have the yachts and the money to buy you a nice house, it would be a great place to retire. But it's a funky little town. It's a crazy town. It's got all this weird Dutch architecture and pink colors and crazy, crazy colors all over. Lots to buy, of course. This is a hotel, but there's also a mall with this same pink all over it. Things that every tourist wants. So it's very touristy. Some people don't like Aruba because it is so touristy. It is very touristy. But you can sit here, by the deck and watch the rich people go by or whatever, and have your Mai Tai. Parliament, of course, is in the capital city, and some artwork. So we did take the little submarine ride, not being a diver or, for that matter, a swimmer. Actually, I took the easy way to go see some tropical fish. These are what you're supposed to see. We didn't see that much, and it's not great for photography. You get this kind of greenish look and not real clear water. So those are some of the best pictures I could get. And again, some of these chipped rocks, I'm not sure where they're coming from. Some wrecks, but a lot of tropical fish. So our last island we're going to visit is Curacao, also Dutch, and the Dutch architecture a beautifully restored city for the most part, right here. And Bonaire, as I said, is the third Dutch one, which we did not see. So Curacao also is Dutch. Willemstad is the capital. And in this case, we did not take a tour out. We stayed in the city because the city just walked around because the city was so fascinating. So this is a map of the old town in several parts. There's a new bridge, which we'll see in a minute, and an old bridge, which goes to the old part of town. But our cruise ships came in right here. So we had a little walk across here. And this is another map of that, just where the cruise ships come. So there's a little walk down this street to the Emma Bridge, floating, Queen Emma floating bridge. So here's the new bridge, so they can have some cruise ships backed up into that river there, the Queen Juliana Bridge. But here we are getting off, walking through this area, even through the, how did he get on that calliope? I think we recognize Van Gogh, but walking along the harbor to get to the old town. And here is Dr. Juncker, I guess he is. The Northern Antilles was the first independent go at these islands, and then they ended up getting their independence after all. So this, I took the picture of the back of them. That's what he looks like from the front, courtesy of Mr. Google. So the colorful waterfront gives you a chance to sit down and see these beautiful homes that have been restored on the other side. It gives you a little bit of some information about the name Curacao, probably from the Spanish, which is cura, or maybe from heart, corazon. So a little Spanish background in there from the name itself. So the Queen Emma Bridge was built in 1888. It looked like this. It's on pontoons and it moves out of the way so boats can go by. What a nice idea. And it was restored in 1906, I'm sorry, in 2006. And today it looks like this. It's all very safe and all. It's tethered on either end and is on these pontoons so that you can move it when necessary. Now, I did see a picture on the internet of it at night. No, we didn't see it at night because we were back on the cruise ship. These arches are all lit up in blue lights. It's really quite pretty at night. So as you look across to the other side, you see these Dutch buildings all along. You think you're in Holland. It is a World UNESCO site now, and they're beautifully restored. So this other side is called, let me go back, and it's called the Otra Banda on this side. It's literally the other side is the cultural center of the city, but the old town, of course, is really pretty and interesting too. Very, very colorful. So we did some walking around. We went to the fort. As I said, every island has its fort for protection and for all the skirmishes that they had with other countries. And the Curacao Synagogue I thought was interesting too, because it's the oldest surviving synagogue in the Western Hemisphere, 1674. And of course, the main religion is Christianity and Protestant in this one, but usually the English will have Anglican and the others will have Catholic. Some street art. And I wish I could tell you more about what the issues were. Red seemed to be a favorite color in some of these houses, but they come in other colors as well. So even in the neighborhoods, restored homes from a couple hundred years ago. Produce in the markets, of course. We see a little sugar cane here that you can buy, and of course you can get anything that a tourist might want. And some of the artwork, of course. So lots of places to stop and have a quick one, and everywhere you look, there are beautiful buildings of all different colors. I say this is, again, one of my favorites because it's so colorful. Some little narrow streets that, again, interesting. And even though it's Dutch, it's Spanish in the sense that it belongs to Venezuela and has Mexican food, and it's interesting in that way. So this is the last picture in our slide group, and we end with a beautiful sunset. And if it were animated, you would see the end drop into the ocean, and everything would fade away as it's supposed to do.
Wow.
I can leave this up if you like, if people have questions or want to go back to any of the slides. Do we have some questions?
Yeah. Why don't we do that? Do we have any questions? You can unmute yourself if you want to. I already asked the one question that was up about Aruba.
I know some of you have been to the islands too, and possibly other, well, likely other ones and likely other expeditions. So if I went again, even to the same islands, I wouldn't have the same experience, but there are lots of other islands as well that I haven't been to. No comments? Well, I'm just gonna stop sharing that. I can always come back if we want to.
Yeah, we can. We
Just
can.
a question, how many days, because you went to like a dozen islands, how many days was the cruise?
The cruise was 11 days and we put on an extra day in San Juan. When I was looking for a trip, I looked at Miami and we could do fewer islands and more money, or go to San Juan and have more islands and less money. And I think, what's wrong with that picture?
Mhm.
Threw in San Juan as well, that extra day. It's good to be there a day early in case you have things going on like like now when, oh, sorry, everybody's out with COVID, we're not going today. Come back tomorrow, or maybe the next day. So, you know, if you're smart, you go get your cruise a day early, unless you're driving to Galveston or something from here. Did that one time too. No questions? No comments? Surely you,
I can tell you a story.
okay.
It's a Caribbean story. I always have a story. We were leaving Canada and I handed my passport to the customs, the immigration agent. And he looks at me and he says something like, so how did you enjoy the Caribbean cruise? And I said, I've never been on a Caribbean cruise. And he looked at me and he said, I think you've been on one.
He almost accused her of lying.
Right. And I said, no, I haven't. And we had this sort of standoff. And then he shows me my passport and there is a stamp from Saint Martin.
Yeah.
And he says, look at the stamp. And I said, yeah, I went to a destination wedding there. We flew.
Yeah, absolutely, you can do that.
They almost didn't let me out of the country.
Oh,
So, Mary, there in March, there's a swim that goes from St. Kitts to Nevis
Yeah.
across that 2 miles. It's some 60 or 80 feet deep, and it's evidently a big deal. You know that a lot of people come from the U.S. to go down there just for this
Yeah.
swim out in the ocean.
Well, the same with these boat races from Antigua. Apparently, they're very popular with sailors. They'll go to Antigua just for the races, either to sail or to, watch them.
Kathleen, do you have any evergreens on an island?
I don't know.
Puerto Rico.
We have someone in Puerto Rico, and we had a member who was planning on selling their house and moving to the Galapagos,
Oh, really?
I think.
No,
No,
there's no people there.
No, unless she's,
no. Well, it was some Caribbean island,
Well,
and
Barbados.
they, no,
Guadalupe.
yeah, maybe.
maybe it was that one. Anyway, their plans kind of, and they were planning on like staying with Evergreen. And I forget, I mean, this was a couple years ago, and they put it on hold when COVID happened. And then their plans just sort of changed for various reasons, and I'm not sure, they weren't sure what was going to happen. So it's still not totally out of the picture, but it's interesting. In the last a couple of days of December, there were a lot of people that had been members of the club that were coming back in. And one of them actually lives in Washington State. And he actually has 2 RVs on a mountaintop. And so, and then Gail Turner, are you still, she was on earlier. Is she on?
Yes.
She's gone. But she's, oh, there you are, Gail. She has a RV and we haven't got, she wrote an email and said, what do you think about maybe sharing my RV? And so we'll talk about it later, but it was just interesting that in like 2 days, I had 2 things about RVs come up. And I know there's a lot of people in our demographic that are looking, you know, after retirement, you know, they're really exploring the whole RV experience. And that could be kind of a fun, you know, it wouldn't be for everybody, but it could be for the, you know, that might be the adventure you want. And so I thought that was kind of fun. Nice to offer, like we had someone that had a sailboat for a while and hosted out of his sailboat or their sailboat. And again, not for everybody, but for those that love to sail or wanted to see what it would be like to live on a sailboat, I just think that's very cool. Very cool. So did Beth get moved? Unmute. Yeah.
Beth, where are you? There you are. Oh, you're still muted.
Yeah, you're still muted, Beth.
Sorry.
Yeah.
She's at her girlfriend's house in Cape May Point. I'm looking for a house or an apartment right now.
Oh, you are.
Yeah, I've seen for 2 apartments, 2 houses, but neither one would work. None of them would work out. So I'm just when they're having fun.
But you've closed and you're done
I've
with that.
closed. I'm done. It's not mine anymore. It's someone else's responsibility. So.
Great. Well, we thought about you the other day when we were having these 80-degree days, you know, in mid-December, and there was a monarch butterfly that landed on our patio.
Cool.
All by itself.
Texas, where the National Butterfly Center is down near Brownsville, down near McAllen. They're having incredible butterflies right now this year from Mexico that have been coming up. New records of butterflies that have never been documented in the United States before.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Were there any more questions on Caribbean things for Mary?
I just have a comment for Mary. Hi.
Yeah.
My very first cruise was just a short one to the Caribbean. We San Martin and we hit Puerto Rico. San Martin and what was the other one? I just was thinking.
St. Thomas?
Was
it St. Thomas?
Yeah, St. Thomas. And it was so interesting what you had to say about the change in their governments and their independence and so on, because when I went there, you know, it was like in 1974. And so, you know, there's a lot of updating that has occurred in the meantime. And I can see that things look fancier, if you will, you know, than what I remember seeing. So,
You noticed
very, very interesting. That was a very thorough.
Oh, thank you. You noticed in Aruba, those hotels and resorts now are so exotic.
I know.
Just
Yeah.
really remarkable.
I went on a
Yeah.
cruise in 80 for my honeymoon, and one of our stops was Grenada, you say it. And they did tell us when we got off the ship that there would be armed military people around. And we got off the ship and there were many. This was before they had the called it over there when all the American medical students had to come home, the invasion. But anyway, we got off the boat, took a short walk and got right back on the boat. It was pretty scary.
Mhm.
Not a
Mary,
fun time.
when you were in the towns, did you eat it? And I mean, I know the cruise ship is going to provide food, but did you eat at any of the local restaurants or street vendors?
Not really. Usually the tour included a lunch somewhere, which we didn't have any control over, or we were back in time for lunch, maybe a late lunch, or we just snacked, you know, that you saw the Amstel sign, you know where I was. Yeah, so just sit back and have a beer. But yeah, most of our food was off the ship. So I can't speak a lot to the food. I know I have very few food pictures. I know everybody, there are a lot of people who photograph every meal they eat, but I don't do that.
And how were the languages? Did you go to places where they only spoke French or only spoke Spanish or Dutch?
That's not really the case. They may be all these different countries, but they're tourist places and everybody speaks English. Everybody does. I mean, and the same with money. I never had to change any kind of money. And that was true in Mexico too. Even my last trip, which was February of 2020, along this west coast of Mexico, I never changed in any Mexican money because everybody in those cruise ship ports will take the money. And that's kind of the way it goes. And they speak English. They cater to the
Well,
tour.
but it's the US Virgin Islands. So, you know, they do take American dollars.
Oh, yeah. But I mean, all the rest of them do too. They're
Yeah,
not gonna turn your
right.
money down. No, that was never an issue at all. And we'd see signs in different languages. You know, you saw some of the names that have been there since 1600. And,
Wow.
you know, if you know some Spanish or French, that's helpful, I guess, particularly reading things, but you don't have any problem speaking to anybody.
Right.
Well, you were talking about Aruba having being just the drier and different kind of climate. And we had gone to the British Virgin Islands and the US Virgin Islands, and they were like that. They were totally different kinds of topography and the climate, the fauna or flora. Do you remember any specifics on that, Jack?
Only that we were in St. John's for a week and it was very lush and jungly. And what was the island we went to where the baths were? It was part of the British Virgin Islands across from Portola, and it was dry.
Gordo.
Oh,
Well,
Gorda.
sorry.
Virgin Gorda.
Yeah, Virgin Gorda. And
Gorda.
there were these rocky land crabs that you'd go walking along the cliffs and you'd hear a noise behind you. You'd turn around, like, who's there? And you'd walk a little further and another noise. And it was the crabs letting go from the rocks, rolling down the hill.
gosh.
And they were like, and they're like some dry country thing, you know, that weren't the jungles, but were up on these cliffs. It was a pretty neat place, pretty fun. But yeah, it was Virgin Gorda where we were.
Yeah. But yeah, they weren't that far apart, and yet they were just totally different. So that was fun.
Yeah.
That was interesting to see.
Kathleen and I went by sailboat down among different islands down there, and that was a nice way to see it, because we've done a cruise, but to go into the smaller islands and smaller ports was a lot of fun.
I just by accident hit upon this story online about a couple that had their cruise canceled this year because of COVID. So they set up the cruise in their backyard. It was a couple in Ottawa, And so what they did was they put the different islands in different parts of their backyard. They set up lawn chairs, they made signs, they drank margaritas, they made snow angels in the Grand Caymans, they played golf. They had a mariachi band in Cozumel. They wore shorts, they played guitar, they went scuba diving in their bathtub, and they had formal dinners every night and breakfast buffets. And they actually also went shopping, and it was like curbside pickup. So they shopped as if they were shopping on the island. Those things. I think that's a great idea. I love it. And then every day people were talking to them all about, this lasted a week. People talked about their islands, just like kind of what we're doing, and it took everybody's mind off of the pandemic. I thought it was an adorable idea.
Yeah, make the best of it, right?
Mhm.
That sounds like fun.
Oh, that's great. Well, we can stay and chat a little bit longer, but I really, Mary, your internet and it all worked perfectly this time. And
Well,
thank you so much.
You didn't see the presentation mode, unfortunately.
Well, I mean, you do way fancier stuff than most of us do. I need to have you give me a lesson at some point.
Animation's fun to play with.
It is.
Good, as long as it's not overdone. And you can get carried away and do all these flipping things, and it's distracting. I try not to do that.
Right.
Some things come in one at a time, like all that text one at a time, or where the 4 pictures on one at a time.
Yeah. Well, it was wonderful. I really appreciate your sharing it with us.